Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories podcast, where we get to hear from innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers on their journey embracing the spark and finding happiness. Today's conversation is one I have been sitting on for too long. Mike Brennan and I recorded a while back, and through what I'll call a series of unfortunate events, I was afraid it was not going to make it to you. However, hallelujah, all is good, because this one has really stuck with me. Mike's story hit hard as I was personally knee-deep, or I guess I still am, navigating some professional and personal moves. His story is such a powerful reminder of the importance of trusting ourselves when we are called to make a change, and why we have to confidently embrace our spark, without that fear of judgment or questioning what will everybody think. The reality is, no matter how much we try to ignore it, that spark is never going away. Now, Mike's childhood dream was to be a cartoon, and when he realized that wasn't quite possible, he became the next best thing. He got involved in ministry. Okay, maybe that's not where you saw this going, but I think there are many of us that can relate to finding ourselves out of step with the passions or talents that come so naturally to us, which in Mike's case is an artist. Now, this wasn't always his story, and we get into the many professional twists and turns he's taken, and really the mental toll it takes when we deny our creativity. That conversation, part of the conversation alone, is what really resonated so strongly with me. Thankfully, Mike found his way back to that childlike wonder and creativity. And in fact, before I knew who Mike actually was, I knew of the artwork he did at various events through people I've been connected and networked with. Now, this episode is a must listen for anyone feeling personally lost, professionally lost, or just really longing for connecting with that hobby or passion you once had. It's especially great for anyone that is curious about how to establish that daily creative habit. Well, Mike, thank you for joining on One Spark Stories. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Katie. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Really, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And man, I always look forward to opportunities to just dive in and just explore. And I think we're like-minded like that. So this is exciting.
Yes. And while for years, the idea of art was not my creative outlet, it actually scared me. I was the student that would get so frustrated over being told there's this way to do art. You're going to get a bad grade if it doesn't look like that. And so the idea of art scared me. So I embraced the notion of creativity, and yet you're coming in talking about art and creativity, and I am loving the message you sent. So if you don't mind just giving a quick little intro of who you are and what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Mike Brennan, and I am a creator and communicator that tells stories on pages and stages. That's kind of how I've surmised the things that I do, because I do a bunch of different things within the creative realm. Some of them are visual art oriented. That's my background, graphic design and illustration. And so I still do those things today, branding, marketing materials, and then also in illustration, I do, different client work, and I also live sketch events. So I go to conferences and kind of tell the story through a series of images that I create on the spot in real time. And then on the other side of things, the communicator side, I speak and I communicate through what I've called now my daily creative habit, which is my own journey and things that I've learned along the way that I figured out weren't just for me, but they were for other people. And so any opportunity I get to either speak or to share on my own podcast, Creative Chats, or to blog about really the communication side is big for me, because that's where I get to share my heart and I get to share my journey and say, again, I'm leveraging my experiences. I'm leveraging the things I've been through so that they're not just my own story, but they can be helpful for other people. So that's kind of the long and short of it. There's a lot of other moving parts in there that if you get down to the nitty gritty, but that's kind of the overview.
I absolutely love the entire concept of live art and at events. I'm an event junkie and have even started taking a lot of pictures when I go out and do consulting because I think there is something to be said about that visual moment and capturing it. So
Hmm.
I am beyond excited to just see, learn more about how you got to that point. But selfishly, I'm already thinking like, all right, I need Mike to show up at something. So very cool.
Hmm.
Now let's back up a bit because I think there's a lot of our story, our purpose that we end up hiding over the years. And
Hmm.
yet, once we uncover that inner child, we start to reconnect with purpose. So, I'm interested in exploring you as a child. And were you an imaginative kid? Were you artistic? Did you feel artistic as a kid?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was the typical artist kid, where really so much was going on internally. I was very shy and didn't have a lot of friends and watched way way too many cartoons. Um,
Not a
but
problem.
that was my world. It was like, I loved. I wasn't so into like the hey, look at how this is done and there are animators behind this or the artists behind it. Like I didn't care about the people who actually made the thing. I cared about like the characters and the stories and just being so caught up in all that. So my artwork early on was all about those things. And so some of my earliest memories were of creating greeting cards for family members that were based on like, cartoon characters, Bugs Bunny and Woody Woodpecker and all the classics. Or it was things that I was looking at in the newspaper like Garfield or Bloom County, all these types of art input, if you will, were feeding me as a kid. And I was learning how to draw other people's characters. And then so I would make these greeting cards and I would give it to a family member and I would see their face light up because they were like, wow, you created this piece of art for me, like you did this specifically with me in mind. And I was like, yeah. And so they would hang it up on the fridge or do whatever they do with it, but their face would light up. And I didn't know at the time, because obviously when you're a kid you're just doing what feels good, you're doing what you enjoy, right? But looking back, I realized, there was something happening there in those moments where I was leaning into something that I was excited about, and I was able to create something, make a connection with somebody else. And there was a transference that happened there. Joy went from me to them, and I wanted to do as much of that as possible. So I just leaned all the more into how many different things can I create and make and draw and just be as creative as I can be.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is so. I'm going to take a minute to be a bit braggadocious on my own kid because our
Yeah.
house is not very, well, let's just say we have our own art hanging up everywhere. And I feel what you're saying. Like, this is what we just embrace the artistic
Awesome.
moment. And,
Yeah.
it's taking that thing that we see, that cartoon that we love, and saying, okay, can I do this? And then eventually putting their own spin on it.
Hmm.
So, what cartoon was your go-to? Did you have a couple that were like, these are my favorites?
Yeah. As far as like, that's hard because I mean, really, it was like, I'd say like, there's that line from Office Space. I celebrate the catalog of, Michael Bolton, the whole catalog. I want to say the same thing as far as like Hanna-Barbera. I celebrate the whole
Oh,
catalog of Hanna-Barbera. But it's kind of true. Like anything Hanna-Barbera that came out. I mean, Scooby-Doo is definitely at the top. The Flintstones, Woody Woodpecker, Bugs Bunny. I mean, Looney Tunes in and of themselves, like not just the characters, but like the stories and the jokes. Like it was
yes.
so sarcastic and so like New York, which is where I'm from. So it's like, I was like, I felt seen and heard.
It's awesome. Yes, I felt that way. And maybe I shouldn't admit, but Rocco's Modern Life was the one that I could just watch that all day and be like, these are my people. I need these friends.
Yeah, yeah.
So ridiculous. So, when you were a child, did you even imagine that this is the career that you would have? What did you see yourself? I'm going to guess it was something within art, but did you see it unfolding like this?
It's, I don't know that I actually thought about like what could this look like. Like I didn't know any artists,
Mm,
so I didn't have context of like, oh, that's what it would look like as a job. I knew that I wanted to do this, and the more that I poured into it, the better I got at it, and the more
mm,
connections I made. I had more and more experiences where I would create things and give it away, and people, would be very appreciative. So it was a very affirming to me and validating that that was the direction I should go in. And then it eventually came to like, okay, well, high school, college, what am I going to do here? Like, okay, there are obviously people who are artists, who are fine artists, who create things and sell things and get into galleries and do that whole thing. That seemed very beyond me, because I didn't really understand that world. And there was also a bit of, just honestly a lot of intimidation because of the talent that was around me. And then there was also conversations with my parents because, when it came time for college, it was the dreaded, wait, you want to go to art school? Don't you want to be a doctor? Don't you want to be a lawyer? Don't you want to be something that can actually make money? And I understand the concerns, certainly. And I was so stubborn, I told them, I was like, well, if I'm not going to art school, I'm not going to school at all. I'll show you, it's like, I'll shipwreck my life and, right. So, they realized that I was pretty serious. And so they were very supportive. And, I ended up going to art school the compromise was graphic design. They said, at least go into something that is commercially viable and that you can, make some money at, and not just be the quote starving artist who's trying to sell paintings on the street or whatever. I don't know. So that's what kind of shape that took for me, was going to actually Fashion Institute of Technology and then School of Visual Arts in New York City, and graduating with a design degree. And I figured I was very much into music and pop culture, and I thought if I could get something that was aligned with that as well as do the design stuff, then that would be a home run for me.
Yeah. And I think that is something that so many people battle with, that decision. Okay, career, college, especially now, there are a number of professionals that look back and think, man, I didn't go the direction I wanted to because I thought I had to do that. And it's funny, I'm one that looked at an art school and was interested in graphic design, but it was that uncertainty. Is this the direction? Is it not? And yet now, multiple degrees later, because I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, I am doing podcast production for multiple shows and graphic design and art. It's like, dang it, I should have just listened to that. So kudos to you for just being like, no, this is it. I feel it. I know it. So a big thing that I believe that we need to get better at is connecting with intention and being very purposeful. And I am curious, throughout your career, was there a moment or a person or people that you connected with that helped you really launch that professional career or build that confidence to go your own way?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have specific people that were like, this is my mentor, and kind of putting that big statement on. It was a lot of in the moment, at the right time, someone came along, or there was something I was exposed to that was very helpful in terms of either a book or a class or something that helped guide me. I tend to be somebody who I practice being very self-aware. I journal a lot. And so I'm always looking to guide myself as much as I can, and then gather around me the things that I need to help me. And so sometimes that's podcasts. Sometimes it's, other people's stories, to go like, okay, there's somebody who's a few paces ahead of me. What is their story? What is their context? And is there something I can learn from that then I can apply to where I'm going or where I want to go? So I think, certainly there were moments of like my high school art teacher who spoke a lot into me, for saying, hey, I think you have something here. You should pursue this. And then there were certain professors along the way who, again, encouraged that, and spoke into me belief. And then other people who, sometimes it was outside the realm of art and creativity, and just in general life, where they were saying the same things and saying, hey, step out, keep growing, believe in yourself. And there was a lot of my own journey that I had to figure out, like, where is this going, and what is this supposed to look like, and how is this really aligned with who I really am? And it's funny now, I mean, this is so many years later. My journey's been very windy, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of different things that have happened. But it's led me to the place of understanding I have a greater context than just graphic design or visual art. Like, that's what I was interested in. That was the starting point. That was certainly, and certainly is still a lot of what I do. But confronting that thought of, oh, it's bigger than that. Like, my life and my mission, my purpose is bigger than that. That's an expression, and that's a part of me. But really, there's so much more to me and my experiences in my life that comes out in different ways. And so understanding that and embracing that and saying, oh, well, if there was ever something that happened to me where I couldn't perform those creative abilities anymore for some reason, then my sense of self and identity and purpose is still rooted. It will find a different way out. It's really more about the way I see things and what I do as a result. That's the kind of greater thing. And under that umbrella could be any number of things as far as how that's expressed.
You just said something that has warmed my heart, and I want to just basically build a really long poster with, because it is very challenging when people are like, well, what do you do? And as a creative, it's hard to explain sometimes all the opportunities you see and all the ways that you let that come out. But you so beautifully stated that it's okay. And if anything, it's even more powerful to embrace all of those passions and finding the purpose in them. Because the minute you, at least in my experience, the minute you pull back on one and think, you know what, okay, maybe people think I'm doing too much because I work in education and I am a podcast producer and I book travel and I speak, and yet all of those, to what you said, are under the umbrella of helping the innovation catalyst, or using that innovation catalyst, helping people see the world differently. It makes sense to me. Your journey makes sense to you. And so thank you for just reiterating the value of that, because that journey is one that's really important. Now, going back to what you said, it's been a windy road. What was a moment that really you had that spark? And, maybe it was an idea, or maybe it was a shedding of a mindset, or I like to say unlearning something that you were like, whoa, I see the world in a whole new way, and doors just opened. Did you have that moment? Or many?
Yeah, I think I've had several of those moments, honestly. And earlier on, like, I consider the first half of my life very much like I wanted to just do a good job, but I wanted somebody else to tell me what that looked like. And so I didn't really have much agency or ownership over my own creative self, or even myself, honestly. I wanted to know, okay, give me the creative brief, or give me the rules, give me the parameters, and then set me to work. And I'll work long and hard, and I'll do a great job. I'll be a great worker, but I need the context. And I didn't know that there was a deeper level for me to own at that point. And that kept me drifting a lot in and out of different positions, and wrestling with me feeling like, is this it? Because I feel like there should be more than this. And I think the first wall that I hit was I was in several different positions in graphic design and advertising agencies, and I would bounce around, like, say, every 4 or 5 years, different positions because of just different circumstances. But eventually came to this place where I was working for this magazine, and we had deadline every 2 weeks. Great people, great company, loved most of the stuff about it. But I just felt this emptiness where I was like, I have a deadline every 2 weeks. I don't feel like I'm getting to enjoy what I just did, and I'm moving on to something else. And I just started to question, like, is this really making a difference? Like, I don't know that there's a significance to my work, and that was really gnawing at me. And at the same time, I was very much plugged into my home church, where I was serving and volunteering and a lot of people stuff, right? Relationship stuff. And that's where I felt like I started to come alive more, because I knew that there was a direct correlation to me being helpful, and my life mattering to somebody else directly. And so that that divide started to grow more and more until this point where I just felt like, I think I'm done with design. I think I'm done with the art world, and I'm walking away and I'm going into full-time ministry, and didn't really know how that was going to happen. I mean, that's a whole other, I could talk for days on things that happened in that period of life. But, long and short of it was I walked away from all my art, even personally, for about 10 years and went into full-time ministry. And, in that, there was a lot of roles and things that I took on that were not in my gifting, simply because someone had to do it. And ministry, it's very hard for there to be boundaries on things. And so I was not great at that either. And 10 years into it, I was suffering from depression and didn't realize that a lot of that was tied to misalignment of roles and responsibilities, me not being creative, and how much that was impacting me. I was working with family and friends, and you have finances in there, and the faith community. There's a lot of things in the same bowl, and when something starts to unravel, it all touches everything else. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew it was apparent to me. It was like, okay, I need to leave now. I had helped plant a church with my best friend who I grew up with. And it was like, okay, I need to leave this, but I've been out of design world for 10 years and I'm chewed up from ministry world. And so I don't know where that leaves me other than broken, bleeding on the side of the road and going, is this life now? Like, where do we go from here? I was at rock bottom, and it was compounded by some other life events of my dad getting cancer and dying quickly, and a significant move, and just loss after loss after loss. And I just remember just thinking to myself, like, I don't know how I got here, and I don't want to be here, but I don't know what to do. And it was in the midst of that I had gotten a position where it was a design position in a church. And so it was kind of like two worlds coming together a little bit, but I was not in a position where I had any responsibilities or authority or like anything high level like I once had. And it was humbling, but at the same time, it was a gift because it taught me to pull the car over on the side of the road and like get some health and some healing and some things that I really needed, even though I didn't know that I needed it to that level. And through some therapy and through some other things, eventually, I started to hear this voice inside me saying, come back to your art, because at one time it brought you joy. Like, don't think about it in terms of client work. Don't think about it in terms of what you can sell or monetize or anything else like that. It's not a side hustle. It's not a whatever, like, just simply because at one point in your life, it made you happy. Can you get back there? And that was really the leading question of, can I get back there? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. And I just started to surround myself with some things, like some books and some courses and some voices that were speaking in and saying, try something. And I came to this idea of a 365-day art making journey, which honestly scared me because I thought, I haven't shown up for the last 10 years. How can I show up for an entire year every single day and do something, creatively? But the thought wouldn't escape me. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get out my sketchbook, and I blew the dust off the thing, right? And went to a Starbucks and sat down and with my pen, and I just drew this Starbucks coffee cup that was in front of me. And it was horrible. It was so embarrassing. And, I thought to myself, man, I went to art school. If anybody knew that and they saw this, they'd be like, dude, what happened to you? Like, yikes, that's pathetic. And so it was a humbling moment because I had to wrestle with my capacity. My capacity is not what it once was. And I had to embrace where it was and give myself grace and say, this is all I can do right now. A 5 or 10 minute, really crappy Starbucks coffee cup drawing. And I wrote at the top day 1, and I made a decision. I said, I'm going to close the book and I'm going to show up again for day 2. And I'm going to forget about day 1. And just see what happens on day 2. And so I started to do that, and I started to just give myself little projects along the way. And I had to break down the 365 to smaller chunks, which is what I started to do to get to that point. And eventually I got to the end of a year. I showed up every single day, did some kind of drawing or painting, and was amazed that I actually started to do this. I started to feel some health and life return again. I started to feel like some passion and some connection inside of me. And I thought, okay, I've reached the end of a year. Now what? And it was like, I'm not done. Keep going. So I kept going and kept building on these things and kept learning and kept leaning in and experimenting and playing and breaking things and just going like, it doesn't matter because this isn't for client work. It doesn't matter for how much things cost. It's like, I make the rules here. This is my own little container and it can look like whatever I want it to look like. And so I just embraced that and ran with it. And then I started to get more momentum and traction and figured out what I liked. I figured out what my voice and my style as an artist was, which all these years going to art school and even in the field, I had never uncovered that. Now, granted, I was doing more illustration stuff at this point, not design, but it was still, oh, there's so much more inside of me that I hadn't realized. And confronting that and embracing that, and then saying, okay, let me learn and grow. And then I started to figure out, oh, there's principles here that are at work that, there's a process that's not just for me, but I think for other people. So I started to take note of that and then started to think, how can I talk about this with other people and help other creative people? And so this whole thing has been a journey for now the time of this recording, this coming April will be 11 years where every single day I've shown up and done some kind of drawing or painting or creative act. And I've had different artwork series created through this. I've had different opportunities to collaborate with people through that, gaining some confidence, gaining some perspective, understanding myself better so that I can then help some other people as well, and stepping into this role of like being a guide and a mentor for other creative people, because I'm like, I've been there, I get it, I know what it's like. And to either want to create something and not know what to do with that, or to have walked away from something and try to come back to it and go, is this even possible? So along those ways, along that journey, there were so many moments where you asked the question of like, where were the points at which you had those moments that were like aha moments or significant moments? That's where it started, was out of depression. But along this journey, it's continued to grow and flourish. And I continue to push into that for my own personal growth as well as my own professional growth at this point.
That consistent discomfort is all I can think of, because everything you've just said is personally I feel it. I feel what you're saying. And when I have said before, like if a creative disappears, it's not because they've given up, they're doubling down. I think what's very important to share in that messaging is that sometimes that doubling down means doubling down on self-care, doubling down on figuring out where have I gone and how do I get back to me. So you talk about this journey and, consistency, and nobody needs to forget that, this is a years-long journey, and you showed up and you went through that moment of saying, gosh, what happened to me? Yet in that discomfort, you eventually found your style, your lens. So in turn, my other big pillar is you've created this opportunity for others to explore that consistent discomfort through your daily journal. So can you explain more about what that is and how others can now kind of tap into their own story and style?
Yes. So like I said, out of this journey came this process and this kind of framework, if you will, that I realized was at work. And I said, it would be selfish for me to keep this to myself. I need to share this with other people, and not just other visual artists, but really anybody who's creating anything. I believe that we're all creative. It's just a matter of how we look at that and how we define that. And you can be creative with your schedule. You can be creative with numbers or with organization. Like there's so much more than just drawing, painting, dancing, music, the obvious, visual and performing arts. And so anybody who's creating anything, it could be a book, it could be a course, it could be a piece of art, I wanted to give them something that would help them show up more consistently, because that was my journey, right? That's how I ended up where I am now, was the consistency. And I knew that I had moments in my life and periods in my life where I would flirt with my art. I would show up every once in a while when I thought, I have enough time there's a weekend, there's a half a day or whatever. And then what would happen is I would try and gather up my supplies and set up my thing and try and think of what am I going to create. And I'd burn up so much time, energy, and effort in that part of the process that I wouldn't actually create anything. It was like, oh, I had this time, whatever. Or you're kind of waiting for inspiration. I'll do it when I feel like I get struck with, that idea or whatever, and I'll follow that. And the problem is there's too many other things that crowd that out, and we never get to that point. And so I knew I need a system for me to show up every single day, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes in the beginning, and build on that. And so that's where this framework and this process came from in this journal, the Daily Creative Habit Guided Journal. It's me sharing my own system for showing up consistently. And so regardless if somebody wants to, again, create a course, a book, a piece of art, piece of music, whatever it is they're creating, it's not going to get done unless they put the work in. And they're not going to put the work in unless they have some kind of system to harness that helps them show up every day. And as you know, like, we need to put in a lot of bad work before we even get to the good work. And so that means putting in a lot of time and being intentional about our creative efforts, and not just going according to the whims, right? So this journal, it's set up, it was inspired by like a gratitude journal that I have, which is there's a creative quote to kind of give you some inspiration, and then there's a section in the morning that's designed for you to just spend like 5 minutes, if that, to say, how am I going to show up today? What am I going to create? What is that going to look like? Just some prompting questions for you to set intention for your day and to get real specific. And then the thought is that you will go out into your day, you'll have this with this intention in mind, and you'll start to actually implement these things. And at the end of the day, there's a section you return to for about, again, 5 minutes, and you just fill in, what did you create today? And if you didn't create something, then okay, tomorrow's a reset. How are you going to show up tomorrow? And like, what can you celebrate? Because I think a lot of times we don't stop and celebrate the things that we've accomplished. We're so much on to the next thing, especially as creators, right? We're thinking the next, and we have a problem with staying in the now. And so this question of what can I celebrate and how am I going to celebrate that, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that we track and measure our progress, because it's easy for us to always be, we're not there yet and forget where we've been and all that we've accomplished. And so these questions really designed to, again, set intention, to get us to have some action steps, to be very specific, and to repeat this process on a 90-day journey. And the thought is here, at the end of 90 days, you will have this habit, this rhythm that you're in of at least setting these intentions and then going out into your day. And even again, if it's 5 or 10 minutes, carving out some kind of time in your schedule, in your day, to make sure that you're creating. And from there, you can just build. But at least it gives you a starting point. It gives you a framework and a system to harness so that you're not just kind of flailing about.
And as a creative, sometimes systems can sound scary, but they're important. Mm-hmm. And that consistency and routine, and even more so, not waiting for the inspiration, just going with it. Because for myself, I feel like using that exploration time has really allowed me to start to say, you know what, I actually don't like that. So now I know I can check that off. I did it. I tried it, moving on. And I love that you're now putting it in a process, because that consistency is so important. Stick with it long enough to discover, do you actually really love it, or do you like love it? And that's right. That's where we need to start to tap in and then build upon that. So cool. And I am excited. Yeah.
I also want to say, sometimes people push back because they're like, well, I'm too spontaneous, right? I love spontaneity. I don't want to be very regimented. And this just sounds like something that's icky because it's going to block me in and, block my freedom, right? I completely understand that. And I love being spontaneous. And a matter of fact, my style in my art that I figured out was very messy, very organic. And so I wanted more of that. But the problem is that if you don't give yourself some kind of container and some kind of parameters to work within, either you'll never show up, you'll show up inconsistently, you'll never get the work done, you'll be all over the map. And that spontaneity will start to become a liability as opposed to an asset. And so this whole thing of giving yourself a system to work within, it's almost like giving yourself like a little box. And you're like, okay, this is my container. it just gives some form and some shape. Within that thing, I can go nuts. I can do whatever it is I want to do. I can be as spontaneous as I want within those parameters. And I learned a lot of that stuff, honestly, from the design world and advertising world, because it was projects, it was creative briefs. It was, here's the box, here's what the project looks like. And then within that, unleash your creativity, go wild. What can you think up?
Okay, so I'm going to flip the script on you. And it's so funny you talk about celebrate, because all of this that you are saying is, again, like I said before, I feel all of it. I am over here, even though I'm trying to remain chill, I'm back here like, yes, Mike, keep going, more. So I love it. And one especially is the idea of celebrating. That connect, create, and celebrate are the three pillars. And you just basically took the words out of my mouth on how we don't pause to celebrate our growth, our opportunities, our ideas, and just who we are and where we become. So I love doing this and flipping the script, especially since you called it out. And I want to celebrate you, but I want you to acknowledge something that maybe, we haven't tapped on. You've had a journey, but what is something that you need to celebrate for yourself that we can also join in and celebrate you for?
Oh, that's a good question.
See, even though Mike agrees with celebrating herself, it's hard. It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And also because even though I try to practice the celebrating, I still suck at it, right? Let's be honest.
It's a work. And it's hard.
There's a certain sense of that, like that next that we're working on. But I think I celebrate the fact that this, like I said, this year will be 11 years of showing up every single day and doing something creative. Now, specifically within that, this past year, I hit the 10 mark and I said, okay, moving forward, it's not going to simply be me doing a drawing or painting every day. Like that is certainly a big part of my creative habit, but I wanted to expand beyond that. And so I started writing more. I started tapping into just some like blogging and just honestly social media posts that were expanding upon some other things of dealing with mental health issues and dealing with just observations from life. And the more I started to do that, the more I started to be vulnerable with different areas in my life, the more it resonated with people. And I found people were saying, oh, thank you so much for saying that, because I thought I was the only one, or somebody saying, I have a deeper appreciation from where you're coming from with some things, or I feel a closer bond because you sharing those things. And so, it's not bleeding on people. It's not oversharing, but it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable and practice empathy and do that in a way that is appropriate publicly. But I've been using my creativity to lean more into that. And so I think I'm celebrating that part of my self-discovery and me leaning more into, like I said before, where I've realized my gifting is really in how I see things and what I do as a result of that. Not simply me creating a nicely rendered picture or a certain design or something else that's a piece of visual art. It's more than that. It's when I tap into that and I share that in such a way that it invites other people into it, there's a connection made, and that's the deeper thing for me.
Yeah, it shows that your story, your journey, the downs, the climb, all of it is now able to help others explore theirs. And in those moments, it can be hard to imagine that there is any value or any purpose to any of the mess, but it is serving you well now. And even though there will be hard days and there are hard moments and challenges, but you are impacting many others in a positive way by sharing that. So thank you so much. Because it's not easy to have that creative spark and really tap into what to do with it. It can be overwhelming in its sense. So
absolutely,
finding that consistency and that voice and somebody else that says, I know I've been there and it's hard and it can be messy, but you know what? The more you tap into it and live authentically within yours, golly, the world can become a beautiful place. So
absolutely.
One other big question that I want to make sure we leave everybody with is, what is something you wish people could unlearn?
I wish they could unlearn how they see themselves in what they create so often, because in the conversations I have with people, either it's, well, I'm not creative, and they just wholesale disregard anything that has to do with creativity. Or if they are creative and they're like an artist or musician or what have you, there's so much comparison, and there's so much just angst around our own creative selves. And I think if we could really unlearn that, strip away the comparison, strip away having to feel like we're competing with every opportunity and every other creative person, and trying to make our journey look exactly like theirs, or getting frustrated in our own process. But if we could learn to value who we truly are and what we truly bring to the table, not just for ourselves, but for others, right? Like when we create, if we can keep that place of creating from joy, then it not only brings us joy, but it brings joy to the people around us. And so there's so much at stake for us as creators. And I don't think we often keep that in mind. And I don't say that in a sense of like guilt or weightiness, but I mean in terms of encouragement, in terms of like, there are things that someone who's listening right now, you're the only person who can create that thing, that idea, in the way that you see it, with your fingerprints all over it. And if you don't do it, it's not going to get done. And somebody may do something similar, but it's not going to be the same. And they won't be able to speak to the same people. And they don't have the same experiences that you have, and the same interests that you have, and the same makeup as a person that you are. So embrace that. There's this double-edged sword of uniqueness that so many times us creative people, we struggle with, because we want to be so unique that we're original and we get celebrated for that. And then we also tend to apply that to our own journeys and trials and tribulations. And we think we're the only people who are going through these things. Therefore, no one can understand. Therefore, I'm not inviting anybody else into the process, or to be real and vulnerable with people, because no one would really understand or see me. That's really what it is, right? I want to be seen and heard, and I don't think I can be. So I would say unlearn all that stuff to go embrace yourself first, value yourself, be on that journey of self-discovery, because the more that you do that, the more you will get in touch with who you truly are, what you have to offer, and then it impacts the world around you, right? I say, when you create, we all win.
Mike, just invoice me, because this was basically like the therapy I needed today. I cannot tell you how much that is something that is resonating very deeply, and I know it will with everybody else that gets to hear this conversation. We get so trapped in that idea of, I have to, especially in the world of social media nowadays, like, oh, I have to stand out, I have to. But no, you have done a beautiful job of putting that all together. So thank you. Where can people connect with you further, and how can they get their hands on this daily habit, the Creative Masterpiece Journal?
Yes. So my main website is mikebrennan.me, M-E. From there, you can find the hub for my social accounts, to my creative coaching. If anyone is interested in that, I do offer some one-on-one sessions, and we'll be looking to build a mastermind and some other things like that in the future. You can find the Daily Creative Habit resources there, as well as if you go to dailycreativehabit.com. It's kind of the shortcut to the few things. One, you'll find a link to the journal, which is available through Amazon.com right now. That's in paperback or in hardcover. Also, I want to make sure that I highlight that I have a newsletter that goes out twice a week that I highly encourage people to sign up for. It's free. And if you feel like you need some encouragement, some inspiration, and some practical tools for your creative journey, whatever that is. Again, it can be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be a course, it could be a piece of art, whatever it is that you want to create. I want to come alongside you, and this is one of the ways that I can do, and it's free. It gives you some inspiration. It gives you some daily prompts that are specific from Monday through Thursday or Friday, and then the weekend. It gives you some resources in terms of other businesses and links to products that can help you show up and create. And so I'm trying to curate as much as I can in this thing to be a resource and an aid for you as you show up to create. And I just want to say, take the first small step. And if that's signing up for a free email newsletter, do that. But don't let something stand in your way of creating any longer, because the days are short and there is much work to do. There's much discovery to happen for ourselves. So I would love to connect with anybody who is just feeling like what I've been talking about today resonates.
Awesome, Mike, thank you so much. I have a feeling this isn't the first or last time you'll hear me talk about Mike, or, maybe we'll have to have you back because you have lit that fire in me for sure. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate you, and we will make sure to get everybody in touch with you, the newsletter and the journal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining this conversation with Mike. If you know somebody that is searching for their creative spark or feeling lost in their own journey, do them a favor and share this episode. Make sure to also check out Mike's website for more about him, and most definitely consider hiring Mike for live sketching at your next event or conference. Seriously, they are incredible. There are links to his website, his podcast, and all his social media in the show notes. And as an advocate for creativity, I also encourage you to start your own daily creative habits. So grab that daily creative habit journal and find your creative voice again. As always, be well, stay curious, and I'll see you real soon.
Did you know that Colorado is older than the United States? Sir Isaac Newton created it in 1706.
Later, Tater.